Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the final day, the final Sunday of July. And it's appropriate that we are talking about going deep. Because think about it, the whole topic of the whole year is rising higher, growing deeper. So we must finish off this with the Go Deep talk, which is brought to you by sperm whales. Sperm whales? What? Yes, the sperm whale, my friends. You know that whale that's mostly like all brain, all face, all nose? That whale? The one, I think it's the one from Moby Dick. Huge whale. All right, let's talk. Of course, we are picking up all of our inspiration from the beautiful writings of Alexis Pauline Gumbs, who wrote in her book Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals. She talks about the sperm whale. Now, I have people here that also have access to Google and the tools. I'm about to tell you how deep a sperm whale goes, but it's in meters. So, Mafi, science teacher, how deep is 300 to 400 meters? She'll let me know in the chat. In the meantime, I could have asked this before I started this talk, but I believe in a community that teaches one another. So, 300 to 400 meters deep, you might find an area so thick with life, she says. Now, I'm starting to paraphrase and quote our Alexis Pauline Gumbs. In that depth, there's so deep with life that World War II sonar operators thought it was the bottom of the ocean. They thought that depth was the end of the depth. Guess what? It was not the bottom. It was a bajillion tiny swim bladders reflecting their sonar back to them. First of all, bajillion's not a real number, so I love her wackiness. We're of kin. But if you think about it, if a lot of tiny little bladders are reflecting back, well, the sonar would say, well, that's it. We're at the bottom. Interesting, isn't that? Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind. Put a pin in it. I'll keep reading. Meanwhile, I'll tell you what a swim bladder is. It's an air-filled organ that fish have that allow them to ballast or maintain their depth. And what about us? Now she jumps right to us, which is where I was going to take you anyway. What about us? How do we stay deep even amidst distractions? And she has in parentheses, like racists being racist for racist reasons. I love her saying that 3 times because it's like, yeah, racism be racism. That's a word now. How do we stay deep? How do you keep your swim bladder level, keeping it right so you don't float out of the school formation of the rest of your school? How do you keep it level? How do we know the depth at which life is abundant enough to feed us and our families, if we're being analogous to the schools of fish within which we operate? How do we keep that alignment with our community? How do we keep it so we're down deep enough so that we can get the abundance that feeds us and all of our community all at the same time? How do we not get thrown off of our ballast, of our balance, and get sprung to the top? Now, I did a little research because I'm preparing for this talk and I had questions. And so I talk about a deep dive. I deeply dove into the world of the sperm whale. And in my research, I saw that the reason that their nose is so big is because right in the front of their face, we call it a nose, but it's more like an apparatus in the front of their face. Their elongated face, that's where their bladder exists. And this, when they're normally at the surface, because these mammals are air-breathing mammals, when they're at the surface, it acts like a buoyant, air-filled bladder. But then when they're ready to dive deep, what happens is the contents of the bladder sort of crystallize I'm using the word, I'm paraphrasing, to then act as a weighted sink. If you've ever been scuba diving, you know you've got to put weights around your belt so that you can sink quicker. That's what it becomes. So you got the whole front of their face, my friends, inside which there's an air-filled bladder-like device that then gets harder and gets heavier and allows them to sink nose first down, 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 down into the depth. Meanwhile, the rest of their whole body is doing chemical adjustments so that they don't get what's called the bends. If you've ever been scuba diving, if you come up too fast, of course, the nitrogen that's stored in your muscles and in your tissue just explodes and you die or something really terrible. So not that. These sperm whales, they figured out a way, nature figured out a way to store the nitrogen in another spot and then do the thing while they dive deep, maintaining a lower heart rate so that they don't need as much circulation. They do all this chemistry in their body naturally so they can go way deeper than we even thought. Now here we are, we've got roughly the height of 100 or 130 story building is the depth to which the sonar, thank you, science teacher Mafi, she put it in the chat. So you've got this area that's like 130 story building deep that the sonar thought was the depth. But it turns out they go miles deep. Miles. In fact, the scientists are still trying to figure out, so how? So what? How did they do this? Yeah. The actual diving deep of the sperm whale goes deeper than ever imagined before. So deep that by the time, and this is what I'm remembering, by the time any one of us would have tried to go there, we would have, the depth is 113 times the atmospheric pressure of the surface. So we're not going that deep. We're not doing it. So the sperm whales do it, and they have all this technology in them. Here's the most exciting part, and I love that our author of the month speaks to these sperm whales as if they are the predecessor to the human being. This is why. There are a couple things. One, the sperm whale's brain, 10 times as big as our brain. And two, they actually have communication. So scientists have actually measured their what do they ping? They have like voice. I forgot what they call it. They do these sounds. Those sounds that they emit, like little tick, those clicks, my dear, those clicks. If we were near a sperm whale, you and me, they could click so loud that they would burst our eardrums. They would burst our eardrums. And the amount of decibels is more like 10 times what we can manage. So when divers come into the water next to a sperm whale, they're like, so I'm hoping you don't kill me. Why do they have such loud clicks? Because they can make conversation with others like them in their family miles and miles and miles away. They're communicating with each other in a language. So the scientists said, well, let's go ahead and map out the sounds that they're clicking. And they found out, when they mapped them out as if it's Morse code, they found out that different pods had different frequencies. They had a different language, let's say. Different languages for different pods. And then they took individual ones, and using machine learning, shout out to machine learning, they mapped the sounds of individual whales within the pods and found out that each individual whale has its own way of saying what it says, pitch, tone, frequency of the click within the language of the clicking, and they're calling that their identity. So, wow. Okay, what does all this mean? Do you realize that in the beginning, when spear fishers started focusing on the sperm whale because of there's a covering, an oil covering over their nose, which it got its name sperm because people said, oh my God, looks like sperm. Let's call it a sperm whale. It's not. It's kind of an oil. Thank you very much. But they were being farmed for makeup, candles, and other kinds of cosmetics. That's where they were being hunted. And so because they were being hunted like this, The sperm whales talked to each other over vast distances, and they were not as easy to get. They figured out as a group how to reduce the numbers of hunting success 58%. Now, we're saying that the first year 100% of whales got. And by the time the second or third or fourth, whatever the time period is, they measured it again, and now only 42% are successful. It could not be that the hunters kind of messed up consistently. No, it has to be that over the communication but from pod to pod over vast distances, they figured out how to dodge. If you saw Avatar 3, this is kind of what they were kind of referring to. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about a group of beings. They're mammals, they're air breathing, but they're so much more than that. Do they have language? Yes. Is it sophisticated? Absolutely. Do they communicate over vast distances and come up with a good plan when they realize that, I think we're being targeted, then they do it. This is the highest intelligence in what we would have initially thought was the lowest of species. Can we get away from high versus low? Can we get away from putting humanity and life itself, like not even if it's humanity? Can we say that humanity encompasses more than just humans? Can we somehow start to be compassionate and inclusive in how we see these physical groups of beings? Because if we can do that for these schools and pods of whales, then maybe we can do that for people that don't look like us. And I'm waiting for that boom. Think about it. There are some people that are so violently and in-your-face racist that will run to the front of the line when it's time to protect a tiger or a lion or a dog. Dude, some people treat their dogs and the idea of dogs so much better than they do this migrant or the idea of immigrant. This is wild. And I, again, like our friend Alexis Pauline Gumbs, I feel like, well, if we could somehow find kinship and compassion, however you get there, I don't care. Just get there. And if we can then somehow find ourselves in these bigger things and then take a note from these bigger groups that have been here before us, connecting to their true nature, not really creating so much distance between them and their higher selves. Because even though I'm telling you that these whales know how to communicate in depth and in complex language, that even though they do that very well, what they haven't done that I can see, they haven't created all of the material distractions and started treating the material distractions as if that was their truth. I don't see them creating structures that then they can put their higher self onto the structure and then be defined by that, like we do. I don't see them putting stars. Tamara and I were talking about how today you get a lot of social media people who try to show up and they try to be perfect, and then we as a collective put them on pedestals as if that's the perfect thing to go for, and we forget who we really are. We disconnect from our spirit, and then we feel empty and don't know why. So I don't see them doing that, is what I'm trying to say. So if we were to take lessons from our friends in the ocean, well, it would probably sound a lot like what Ernest Holmes said. He says in The Science of Mind, we are each part of the one universal mind, and that we have vast depths within us. And Jean Houston, who wrote the book, she wrote the foreword in The Science of Mind of one of the editions of The Science of Mind. Jean Houston, our author, wrote this. Ernest Holmes was one of the first to direct us to what is to be found in the vast ecology of inner space. In his scope of understanding and application, he anticipated and prepared the field for the revolution in mind and brain research that was to come. Ernest Holmes did. The patterns of an emerging sacred psychology are offered in the knowing that as we go within, we can access the depths and the structures of our being and build bridges to the great archetypal realm wherein lie the dynamic designs that form and reform our reality. The science of mind shows us how to be active and creative citizens in a universe and innerverse richer than all previous imaginings. In fact, Ernest Holmes writes, no human has ever plumbed the depths of either the conscious or the subjective. In both directions, we reach out to infinity. And since we cannot encompass infinity, we shall always be expanding, always enlarging our capacity to know and experience. And so I'm doing with my hands, if you're just listening and not looking, I'm saying up and down. There's an infinity that we can go up into the divine, into the vast universe. And then there's an infinity that we can go down into our own being, the depths within ourselves that we can discover. Infinity in both directions. And I love this teaching because when I first learned about the science of mind and what Ernest Holmes said, that we're open at the top, it means we don't have to stop growing, because he wrote his book Science of Mind in 1932 or something. We don't have to stop and use his book as a Bible. If it's not in the book, it didn't exist. No, he says this is just the beginning. There's infinite depths and infinite heights that you will see that I've not even glimpsed. And to allow, and I don't want to say allow, but you get in these communities where very dogmatic and fundamental. I love that with this teaching, it is written, that some stuff ain't written. I love that. It is written that you shall write more. When what I do, you shall do more. Even Jesus the Christ said that. Look at your red letters in the Bible. Everything I do, you're going to do more of. So, if we're going to use this sperm whale as a model and move through the rest of our existence with this inspiration, then the diving deep part is all about diving deep within our being, knowing that we were made in a way that we're not going to drown and we're not going to collapse because of the pressure of going within. That no matter how deep we went already, there's some more depth to be found. Because within, we are acting as that sperm whale, diving deep. And then communicating from that depth to others. I'm looking at you, my community. When we go deep, we communicate from that depth to the depth in you. Your deep speaks to my deep. There's something in Psalms called deep calls unto deep. It's when we sit in these rooms and these community meetings that we have and someone says something and that resonates. That's my depth calling your depth and your depth calling me back, and we recognize each other. We keep each other from floating real fast to the top and getting the bends. In fact, I also read that those whales, when they do get interrupted, they will beach themselves. And when the scientists look at the beached whale, they'll find the nitrogen in their tissues. Something happened down there, and then we don't know what it was, and they're doing experiments. And what disrupted something so that a whole pod came too fast up to the surface and just beached themselves? This is what we want to keep each other from doing. When we're deep in our knowing of who we really are, we're deep and we're knowing what we're here to do. We're deep and we're convicted and we've got our intention set. What we don't want to do is read the comments on the last post that we wrote talking about God is divine, whatever we wrote, and someone said, nah, nah, nah. That could take you out of it. Someone criticizes your spiritual path. If you're not really connected, if you're not doing the things and the tools, it could take you out of it. So we're looking to each other, learning from our whale friends, and there are 5 steps. Looks like, she has 6. Really quick, I'll go through them. 1, breathe. Yay! We already covered that. Breath is important, and so with the sperm whale analogy, they can replace 90% of their breath with one breath. So think about that big old thing with the bladder. 90% of the content of their breath can be replaced with just. That's kind of cool. Now, number 2, take responsibility for your forehead. So sperm whales, what I was saying, they adjust the wax that's inside the bladder that's in their forehead depending on the situation. Sometimes it has to be more waxy so it gets heavy to go down, more depth, and sometimes it can, it's fine, I can stay here and be up toward the top, toward the surface. So depending on the situation, what's going on in your head? What are you believing? What messages are you allowing to play nonstop on repeat? We have them. We were talking about this yesterday in Dream Study. There are messages that just are on repeat, and we have to scratch the record, stop it, pop the balloon, whatever it is, interrupt those thoughts. Third thing is hush. Shh. Sperm whales, when they surface, you won't even see barely a ripple on the water. They save their energy for diving deep, and when they do surface, it's barely a ripple. So how do we manage our energy? Are we giving too much to something that doesn't really warrant it, and then not have enough when it's time to do our practices? So that's valid. Everything does not need to be done with your pure, perfect, 100% intention. You might want to save some of that for when it really matters. Now, 4, be flexible. Sperm whales, they dive deep in the ocean, and that pressure is great. Remember, 115 or 118 times what we're used to on the surface. So if there's a lot of pressure deep down, then you'll feel it in your chest. Now, I know you've all been in situations where you're feeling a little pressure, maybe a pressure of showing up just right or appearing a certain way. Some people just call it heartbreak. Just heartbreak when things don't go the way you thought they would go. But this is where we're kind to ourselves. We are built for high pressure situations. And so in these times, we become still and flexible and loving, compassion for ourselves. All right, so that was being flexible. So far, we're at 4. I'll recap real quick. 1, breathe. 2, take responsibility for your forehead. What are you thinking? 3, hush. And then 4, be flexible, because there will be pressure and flexibility in terms of having your compassion for yourself. So the last 2, number 5, to be specific in your actions. You want to make sure that your practice, your daily practice that Tamara talked about, and the 5 pillars that we discuss every Sunday, these should be part of your daily practice. And when you're being specific in your actions, I'm talking about setting intention. Set your intention. And when you sit and do your practice, that is a homage to your intention. You take care of you first. And then 6, listen. Yikes, breathing is the beginning and listening is the ending. This is fabulous. Listening. Now this will be your deepest practice. You'll be listening to that little small voice. Now if it aligns, if whatever comes to you aligns with what you think and what you really feel or what you really hope for, when those are in alignment, then you can manifest even that much faster. But you're pretty much just listening for that deep calling unto deep. And then heeding the listening. Right? So doing these practices every day helps us maintain that center, that ballast. So as hopefully that helps you understand, we are in the midst of something. There's a movement happening. And we know that it's depth that will give us purpose. And we know that we are calling each other from the depths of our souls. And this is why we're attracted to these types of groups. And so to finalize this, we want to just, let's see, Ernest Holmes. Yes, here he is. He says, and this will close us out before we go into prayer. He says, we must learn to live by inspiration. And I love that the word inspiration means, inspire means to breathe. Inspiration, breathing within. I love that. So we must learn to live by inspiration. That means that we should let the spiritual depths of our being flow through our conversation and into our acts. Living by inspiration does not mean living chaotically. Our whole purpose is to make the intellect an instrument for the spirit. We must become artists in living. To live by inspiration means to sense the divine touch in everything. To enter into the spirit of things, to enter into the joy of living. That quote, This Thing Called Life, page 34.